Hello everybody. Finally I released my train plugin with grass, and in this video we are going to see how that works. Well, first go to GitHub and download the latest mtrain release. In this video I explain more about the grass system, so I really suggest to read the wiki page on GitHub and understand the base concept behind this train plugin. And one thing that I want to mention here is this. To be able to work with this train plugin, you need a little practice. I personally think my train plugin is hardest among other train plugin in Godot because to start you need to learn how to set the train setting. Also you need to create train shader by yourself. But it is not super hard. As you learn that, everything become clear and you are able to control everything. Well, in this video we are going to talk about grass system. And I will tell you the same thing again. You should not think that you can put a grass mesh and a grass material inside this plugin and it handle all the stuff for you. This plugin do 50% of the work. The main thing that this plugin is able to do is to generate millions of random grass very fast. And it's do that very well. But it does not care that this grass which is generated is look good or not. Or your grass has a performance setting or not. You are making a very large train. You should create a good looking grass which looks good close to the player, and it also looks good even if it is far from the player. So normally your first grass is not your last grass. You design your grass in Blender for different level of detail and you import that here in Godot. And also many times you need to go back in Blender and make some adjustment. So watch this video with a lot of attention and remember you need a lot of practice. Well, this is the train demo which I showed you in a previous video. I set a data directory here. I also set a layer directory here. By the way, the layer system at the time of the recording of this video has some bugs, which I will take a look at it later. Here I also created a material. In Wiki I explain a little how material works in this plugin. The LOD distance of the train is one of the most important settings that can affect the performance a lot. Basically, this will determine up to which point each LOD is active. Look at this image. This is how mtrain plugin works. The train chunks which are close to player are smaller and the chunks further away are bigger. Here each number represents the level of detail of that chunk. LOD 0 is the chunk with the highest number of vertices. So I am showing you this in this tutorial because grass system also use this information from train. Grass system also create a multi-mesh chunk which are smaller closer to the player and bigger further away from the player. So the LOD setting for train also will affect the grass system. And grass system is not something separated from train. First train get updated, then the first grass will use those information which train has been generated and will update itself. Then the second grass and so on. Basically we can update the train, then we can update all the grass together in different CPU thread. But I thought that this way is better because we don't want to put CPU under pressure in one time. And we don't need to update the train each frame. But if you have a special grass which you need to modify during the runtime, for example, you want that your player cut that grass with sword, it is better to put that in upper position. We will discuss about this in other videos. In this video we are going to discuss about the base for the grass. Also in this video I'm not going to explain about grass with collision. I will make another video about this. Well, I hope up to this point everything is clear. Okay, now I don't want to confuse you, so let me deactivate all of this grass. One important thing about train and grass is that when you change some setting in them, they will not affect it until you restart the train. That is because when train starts, a chain of calculation happen and it is not easy to change some setting in them during the runtime. So you have to restart that. Also, when you create the train, it will also create all the grass which is the child of the train. Okay, this is the same train, but as I deactivated the grass, they are not generated. One thing that I want to mention here is that this plugin inside editor has some bugs. Because up to this point I did not concentrate on development tools on this plugin, but it will work perfectly when you export that. In future I will debug and add more tools for development. So now we want to create a new grass. Let me find a good spot for that. Okay, here is good. Select the train and as the child of the train create a grass node. I just call that simple grass. So the first thing that you need to do is to create the grass data. Grass data has only one setting and that is called density. But this density has nothing to do with the density of the grass. It is the density of the cells. Basically, when you create your grass, your train is divided to a grid of cells. This is the width of each cells. For me, 1 is good. After creating grass data, please save that in a separate file and save that with .res extension. Save data for grass are really efficient, and for this train, which is a 64 square kilometer train, the data of the grass is around 500 kilobyte. And please note, when you create a grass data, you should make sure your grass density and train setting will not change. If train size or the region size or grass density change after you create the grass data for the first time, your grass data is not valid anymore. So the first time you create your grass, a set of data for it will create it, which is valid with this setting. And if you change this setting, it is not valid anymore. So if you change this setting, you should create another grass data and repaint all of the grass. But you can use your grass data for multiple grass, and there is no problem with that. So the first thing that we want to set is the grass mesh. If you open the mesh section, we have 5 LOD. If you change the LOD setting in the train, the LOD setting here also will change. So this LOD and train LOD are connected. Here you can set for each level of detail a different mesh. For example, let me create for the first mesh a cube. Okay, this is the important part. If in some case you want to use the same mesh for multiple LOD, don't create a new mesh again. Just copy and paste or drag the same mesh in other one. Because if you create a new mesh on GPU memory will be created. But if you copy or drag the same mesh, there will be one copy of the mesh on GPU memory. You can save the mesh and use the same saved mesh also. So for here, I drag the same mesh to all LOD for now. After you set all of these mesh, you should restart the train. Okay, now let's paint some grass. Activate paint mode and select your grass. Open the paint panel and start to draw some grass. For now, our grass is distributed in a grid, but we will fix that later. You can delete the grass too. Okay, now let's add some material to our grass. Open Material tab. Here I just set a simple standard material to all LOD. Same as before, we copy and drag the same material to all slot. Okay, done. Now if I restart the train again, you can see the material has been applied. So now let's take a look at our grass. For now, as you can see, the grass is distributed in a grid, and the distance of this grass is the same as the density that we set in the grass data. It is 1 meter. Please note, we can put multiple grass inside each cell. Later in this video, you will see that. So here, the density of the grass is the most important factor of how much accurate we can put a grass on the train. Also, if the grass density becomes smaller, grass needs a little bit more computational power to be calculated. Okay, now let me deactivate the train update so we can see what is like other grass LOD. So now as I move, the train will not get updated. So we can see grass with higher LOD. Here grass on bottom is LOD 0 and grass on top is LOD1. So you can see how everything has been changed from LOD0 to LOD1. The number of the grass has been reduced, also the cell width and height is doubled. If we look at other LOD, their number will reduce even more and the cell size become even bigger. This is a default setting, but you can control this. You can prevent this to happen. We will see that later. Now let me do a simple trick even with this simple cube. Let us change the size of the cube further away from the camera. For that we need to make unique each cube mesh. Okay, can you see that? Now grass far away can be seen better despite we reduce the number of them. Let me draw more grass. So there are multiple ways to make grass far away. One way is to reduce their numbers and make their cell size bigger. Another way is to make different mesh with different level of detail. Another way, which I will show you later, is to make less grass in each cell. So the possibilities are endless. You can do whatever you want. For example, let me create a different mesh for LOD1. As you can see, we have a different mesh for LOD1. Okay, now there are many situations which we want to ignore completely the grass far away and not draw that. So how we can do that? For now, there are two ways. One way is to put a limit to the number of the grass. This is where you can put a limit to the number of the grass. There is another cheaper method which is much better. Just remove the mesh for LOD that you want to be ignored. If you do that, you can see only LOD0 and LOD1 is active and other LOD will be ignored. This method for now is better than the previous method. Well, I hope up to this point everything is clear. Now let's randomize our grass. So open the LOD settings section. Here you can change some setting for each level of detail. Basically, you provide a resource which has some setting in that, which determine the behavior of the grass in each level of detail. Let me create a LOD setting for LOD0. For now, I want that each change that I make will apply to all LOD. So I copy this LOD setting to all other LOD settings. Now each change I make in this resource will apply to all LOD level. You can save your setting too. Okay, good. So I start with offset. This option does not randomize each level of detail. It just offset that from its initial position. For example, if I put offset to 4 in Y direction, all of the grass will move 4 meters up. Okay, this was offset. Now we have another option and that is rotation offset. This also does not randomize the grass. It just rotates them in a certain direction before randomizing them. For example, if I put the X rotation to 45 degree, all of the grass will rotate 45 degree around X axis. And by the way, the order of rotation is Y, X, Z. Okay, now finally, let's randomize our grass. Here we have two properties that we can set. Rand position start and rand position end. Basically, this will generate a random position between these two numbers for each component. But one important thing to note is that the unit of this random number is the cell width. It means if I put the X and Z to 1, it will generate a random number between 0 and 1 cell unit. If I put that to 2, the grass can get out of the cell and go beyond their cell. You can do whatever you want. And one important thing is that currently the width of each cell in each level of detail is different. Okay, as you can see, our grass is randomized in X and Z direction. Okay, now let's randomize the rotation. I randomize the rotation like this. You can see it's randomly rotated along Y-axis and randomly rotated along the z-axis and x-axis just a little bit. Okay, now let's randomize the scale of our grass. For a scale, we have two options, a uniform scale and a non-uniform scale. I just recently add the uniform scale. So why we need a uniform scale? Because sometimes a non-uniform random scale is going to destroy the shape of our mesh and it will look not good. For example, look at this tree. Look how it's deformed with a non-uniform scale. Okay, I think you understand how a scale settings works. Well, now in top we have some other option. The first one is seed. Usually, if you put the seed the same number, it is going to generate the same random number for the same setting. And this is really important in some cases like putting tree on the train, which I will put a tutorial about that in the next video. This option was one of the hardest thing in this system to be programmed. It had a bug, but fortunately now it is working and it can increase a lot of performance in many cases. So this is our train, and each of these chunks connect to one multi-mesh of the grass. But the smallest train chunk currently is 32 meter by 32 meter. That means if we have a lot of grass on the train, still a lot of grass is rendered and not called. So if I put a divide number to 2, it is going to divide this chunk in each direction 2 times. And more grass get called. This means we have more objects that should be processed by CPU. In another word, we put CPU on more pressure for the sake of the GPU. You can see if this option increased your performance or not. Well, the next option is grass in cell, which currently is 1. And if you increase that, you will have more grass in one cell, like this. If you want to put a tree on ground, putting 2 trees in one cell give them more chance to collide. But for grass, this is okay. Well, the next option is force LOD count. Let me clear randomization so you can understand this better. Okay, this is the default behavior of the grass. The number of the grass decrease in each LOD level. But you can prevent that and tell grass to behave like a different level of detail in each level of detail. A little bit confusing, but you will understand that in a moment. For example, here, if I put force LOD count for LOD 1 to 0, it is going to behave like LOD 0, like this. You can see the number of the grass is not changed in LOD 1. And this will give you the full control over your grass. Okay, now let's create a simple grass. I just create this with the Blender, but it is not good enough. I think you should spend more time for designing your grass. So before creating grass in my train, I just create the grass mesh and material in another scene. For grass mesh, I use a quad mesh, but as my experience with the grass up to this point, if you create the grass mesh in Blender and you create a bunch of them together, it will look better. But for this example, I will use just a quad mesh. Just please note your grass pivot point should be on the ground. So normally you should create a shader material for your grass to be able to animate the grass. But for this example, I just create a standard material for grass. Okay. One important thing about the transparency option is that you should avoid using alpha option. It will not look good if you have a lot of grass. Also, it has not a good performance. I really recommend to use alpha scissor, not alpha. Now I just set the albedo and the normal map of the grass. Then I save the grass mesh and material. I just use the same mesh for all LOD here, but I create different material for other LOD and I save them. For LOD1, as you can see, I designed the grass in the way that it covers the space behind the grass too. Now in the grass, I just set its mesh and material. Well done. Also, we should disable the cull mode so the grass will be visible from both sides. Okay, we have some grass. Now we should set the correct LOD setting. I start from LOD 0 and then I go up. Here I just increase the grass in the cell. Okay, for this tutorial this look good. Now let's add other grass setting. For LOD1 I just increase its size. Here there is a problem. You can see a line that separates LOD0 from LOD1. To solve this, you can send some LOD1 grass a little bit outside of their cell. So some of the grass from LOD1 come to LOD0 and they get mixed. So the line can fade a little bit. I just set other LOD setting and make them even bigger. And this is what I achieved. But you need a lot more practice to master this. Also, I suggest to try this first on a small train, so your train will generate fast when you restart the train. If you have a question, ask in the comment section. In the next video, we are going to discuss about the grass with the collision and we can put some tree on the ground. And till the next video, have a good time and bye.